So I'm ready to remove the old main seal out of the inner timing cover. I have a fairly large socket that will fit on the face of the seal, and I'm just going to use a hammer to knock it free. And pops right out. So I'm about ready to install the new seal. I've put a little bit of oil around the edge, and I should be able to just press it in. And I've been warming it up a little bit with my heat gun, so just going to give it a little bit more and then we'll press the seal in. So it's warm to the touch, and as I say, I should be able to just press the seal in, and it goes in until the face is flush with the front of the hole here, just like that. Yeah, that looks pretty good. The other thing you can do is take a flat razor blade edge and just take a look as you walk around the edge of the bore and make sure the seal is sitting uniformly deep. Before I install the cover, I changed the tape on the nose, which I used to protect it from getting nicked when I install the CycleWorks tools. And I pulled the tape back a bit. It used to be right close to the edge here. But the reason I did that is because when I put the cover on, there's a certain thickness here that's going to take up space on the nose, and if I have the tape all the way back, when I get the cover on, I'm not going to be able to peel the tape off the nose. So it's a good idea to refresh the tape and take it out about a half of an inch or more and protect this end of the nose, because once the cover goes on, everything back here is protected. Before I heat up the front cover, I want to set up the CycleWorks tools to help me keep the cover pushed tight against the block. The nose bearing fits inside the cover, inside this hole, and when I heat the cover up, it should slide right over the nose bearing. But what I want to do is be sure that as it cools down, the cover stays all the way against the block, so there's no binding. So I'm just hanging the cover loosely right now, and I'm going to use the CycleWorks tool with the aluminum disc and this groove, and then the pusher face and the pusher bolt. And the way that goes together is the face just slides on, and these are two washers with a little needle bearing to make it easy to turn, and then a nut. And to push the cover on, in the groove side is where you put the pusher face, and then you slide it on and just tighten up the bolt into the threads that are in the end of the crankshaft. There we are. And I've got the nut set, just about right where I need it. And so as I tighten up the nut, it'll hold the cover, since it's pushing on the plate here, it'll hold the cover up against the block. Before I put the timing cover on, I want to install the new gasket. And before I install the gasket, I want to clean the surface very, very well, because the gasket has a self-adhesive, so I don't want any oil to prevent it from sealing. So I use some alcohol wipe pads and clean this surface area until nothing comes off on the pads. Now, the gasket's asymmetric. There's a bump out on this side, but not on that side. and you can't install it backwards for that reason. It has to go on this way, and the little bump out's on this side. Now there's two other small donut gaskets like this, and those are going to go up on the upper holes here and here. So when I slide the cover bolts in, I want to be sure I catch one of these for that top bolt, and the same over here. So I have the inner timing cover out of the oven, and I put a little bit of lard around the outside of the nose bearing to let it slide in easily. The other thing I did is I used a little grease to hold these two donut washers up on the top, so they'll be behind the cover when I slide it on, and it should just slide right on. So here we go. If you were paying attention, you should have seen a mistake that I made. I left the masking tape I had used to keep the master link from falling into the oil pan attached to the bearing carrier. So I had to take the cover off and reinstall it so I could retrieve the tape. Keep your focus on your work. Yep, there it goes. And I'm just verifying that those donut washers are not covering the holes. And I'm just going to run in the bolts up there just to go in and hold through the donuts. So just tighten that up a little bit, and the other one just a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to put the CycleWorks tool on the nose just to keep the cover tight on the nose bearing so it doesn't back off any. I don't have to get real ruthless here, just snug it up, and there we go. So we'll let that cool down. Now that the cover's cooled down, I'm going to install all of the bolts, and I took them out and put them in a piece of cardboard in the location that they go in, just to make it easy not to miss one. One other thing to remember is there are 3 nuts, and they also have thick washers. So when you put those nuts on, don't forget to put the washer in first and then the nut. I find it easier to install the washer if you use some needle nose pliers and slide it in for the nuts, because you want to make sure you get those washers in. The nuts also use a somewhat larger Allen than the bolts do, and so once you get it on the end of your Allen socket here, it's pretty easy to just screw that in and get it snug. So I like to just hand tighten everything first, because these don't get a high torque. So just snug is good to begin with, and then we torque them down. So my nut and bolt card is empty, but just as a belt and suspenders, I want to verify I didn't miss anything. But there's a bolt, 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 nut, nut, and then on this side, bolt, 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 nut. So everybody's there. I want to be sure that the hole for the bean can is concentric and centered around the center line of the camshaft. The reason for that is I want the O-ring in the bean can to seal, and it's good if it's not kind of pressed too hard on one side, but uniformly pressed all the way around. So what I need to do is measure the distance between the edge of the bean can hole and this machine surface on the face of the camshaft. And what I found is a 4mm bolt acts very nicely as a gauge block. So what I do is I push the bolt along the edge of the housing and line it, and then when I get it aligned, it actually just touches the very edge of the face of the camshaft, and I can take my bolt and move it around, looking for any obvious distance differences. And having done that all the way around, it's centered, so I'm in good shape. Now if it wasn't, I'd take a plastic mallet and tap on this edge or over on the other edge to move it a little left or right, depending on what I needed to do to center it. There's not a high torque on the bolts. It's 72 inch-pounds, as in inch, not foot. And I bring these up in 3 stages. I've already torqued all of the bolts and nuts to 35 inch-pounds, and now I'm going to take them up to 70. And if you want, you can take them up in a bit of a diagonal pattern. And you just proceed like that all the way around until you get everybody to 70 inch-pounds. Before I take everybody up to 72 inch-pounds, I'm going to use my heat gun and heat around the front main seal, because I want to be sure that I get this cover nice and tight and butted up against the nose bearing. So if I heat it a little bit and then tighten up a little more, that should ensure everything's where it needs to be. So I set my torque wrench to 72 inch-pounds, and then in a crosswise pattern I just tighten everybody up. Now I have to change the Allen for the next bigger size to get the 3 nuts. The other thing I do is just turn the crankshaft, and it should be very easy to move. If that nose bearing isn't where it needs to be in the inner cover, you'll often feel that as resistance to turning the engine. And then I'll go right back and just re-verify that the torque is still 72 inch-pounds. And then at that point you're done, because the cover is mounted.